Today, some thoughts about the housing market. Hi, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to our latest post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. I'm in Sydney today and I spoke at the UBS conference. We had a panel discussion with a number of other people on the housing sector and property and mortgages. It's quite an interesting session.
My pleasure to introduce our panel today. Could you please join me? Martin, you've got a lot of proprietary research that's caught the attention of the markets. Perhaps give us a 5-minute summary of what you're seeing that's different to what most of the publicly available data sees.
Yeah, so we have our rolling 52,000 households survey. We have 4,500 new households each month, so really up to date. And it's looking not only at what has happened, really quite interesting, but what intentions are. So I'll spell out 5 quick things. Firstly, the number of households intending to transact has created, and of those intending to transact, investors are now saying they are going to leave the market. They actually believe that this is now a critical turning point. That's different from even a couple of months ago. So investors are now looking pretty dodgy. Also, the other people who are thinking of leaving and trying to transact are people who have large problems and trying to actually downsize. They are now bringing their transactions forward because they think it could actually be a problem. Secondly, we measure mortgage stress, which is effectively cash flow. How many households are actually struggling? More than 1 million, are now having difficulty in making those mortgage repayments. That's as high as it's ever been. That's because incomes are flat, cost of living are rising, some interest rates have risen. The other point to make is there about 40% of loan applications from our analytics were rejected, compared with 5% a year ago. So the lending tightening that's come through is having a big impact. And if you put all that together and understand that credit is the thing that drives prices up, the lack of credit and the lack of transactions will drive prices down. And you may know that I've been quoted and will continue to say my absolute worst case is at least 40% is possible peak to trough. Probably not as bad as that, but it could be. So we are in a uniquely different situation. This is not a little adjustment. The household data is saying something very different. I'll just make 2 points. The first is the debt to income ratio is still being written, it's still too high. If you look at the Bank of England, they've got a 4.5 sort of target. I'm still seeing loans at 6, 7, 8 times. So it is not like we've suddenly gone into really, very, very conservative territory. So the pullback is absolutely right, and it shouldn't be reversed. It was way too aggressive. The second point is there's an election next year, and you don't want to be going into an election with home prices going down. So my view is I'm quite expecting to see some what I call unnatural acts, things that will actually kick the can down the road a little bit and will actually perhaps more first-time owner opportunity, those sort of try and actually get people to come into the market. And the people I'm really worried about are those first-time buyers who are buying in at the top of the market and it's now going down. They should hold off. And I think there's going to be an interesting tussle there between stimulus and policy to try and get over the election, because I suspect that May next year and beyond, and whoever is in the next government will have a big issue to do.
Before I throw to John, I might just ask you about what your data says, trying to get a feel for first-home buyers and demand from investors, because it's always difficult to quantify how much of the fall in prices is credit reduction, which has been my view that would be the starting point and the main driver, versus uncertainty, policy makers, change of government potentially, other changes. You got any thoughts around what your surveys are saying about is demand still there, will it provide the dips, or is this time different? We're actually about to go into a structural adjustment.
So let me talk about first-time buyers first, because they're really interesting. Up until about 2 months ago, they were seeing this as a big buying opportunity, right? They'd see these prices come down, they'd see some of the state government stimuluses, so they were piling in. There was some pull forward. In the last couple of months, I've started to see that change in my forward outlooks. So the number of first-time buyers now looking to buy over the next 3 to 6 months is half what it was 3 months ago. So there's something happening there which I think is important, and it's partly because people are now saying, well, hang on a minute, if prices are going to just slide, then why don't I wait? Because effectively I can buy next year potentially low. So I think that is an important thing to watch. It's not uniform across the country, but in the big New South Wales and Victorian areas in particular, first-time buyers are definitely important about. With regard to investors, the number of absolute investors thinking to transact at all, either buy or sell, is down. But for those who are actually thinking to transact in the last couple of months, my surveys are saying they're looking to sell. So they're being forced in some cases because of the switch from interest only to principal interest, which is hitting in some cases. But they're also now looking at the equation where effectively rental streams are flat, static or falling relative to the cost of the property. So on a net rental basis, half of them are underwater. Without the capital growth, investment property suddenly doesn't work anymore. So I'm expecting to see more investors actually exiting the market. In some cases, some of those in Sydney and Melbourne exited last year and started to buy in Hobart and started to buy in Adelaide because they want to do the trick again. It will be interesting to see to what extent that sustains those smaller markets for longer. But I think those two things are fundamentally structural changes in the market. And it's not just the credit adjustment. It is fundamentally about where prices are expected to go. Just add to that, households at the moment who are in mortgage stress, which are the ones I look at from a cash flow perspective, they're doing a couple of things. They're putting more on credit cards. So whilst overall credit card debt is down, credit card debt is rising in these stressed households. They're also raiding their savings. Now those are both strategies which are okay for a little while, but are unsustainable long term. And so I'm thinking that 2019 will be where we start to see some of these things impacting. We're already seeing 90-day arrears up a little when rates are horribly low. It shouldn't be high, it should be right down there. So we've got some seeds and early warning signs there, I think, of more stress in the system next year.
Many of us in here really get our sort of hands dirty with the data. We try and understand the relative importance of every bit of data. I wanted to ask the panel about measures of housing stress. There seem to be sort of two main competing measures. The industry standard is a 90 days arrears rate, which a couple of panel members have mentioned, and I think that's edging up, but it's still under 1%. Martin has a competing measure, which I think he said is over 1 million households have housing stress, and I think there's about 10 million households and maybe there's 4 or 5 million mortgages. And so Martin's measure, correct me if I'm wrong, is something like 20%. So there are two competing measures. One's sort of 20 times bigger than the other. I assume Martin's measure is a bit of a leading indicator of the industry standard 90-day arrears rate. So two questions, like what are the pros and cons of those two measures? And Martin, what's your best guess on what that arrears rate might be in a year or two's time?
Okay. Yeah, so you're right. My measure of stress is completely different for the default, right? Because what I'm looking at is cash flow. What tends to happen is the cash flow converts ultimately into distress and ultimately then into default. There is a correlation. In fact, the way we do it is we measure mortgage stress in terms of money in, money out, and are they actually able to meet those all their repayments, including loans, but also their other cash expenses as well. We don't use a standard 30% metric. That doesn't tell you anything about the situation anymore. Then we move into what we call severe stress. So these are people who are deeply underwater, and there's a much stronger correlation between those who are deeply stressed and those who then subsequently default. There's about an 18-month delay, but actually I can track pretty well the 90-day defaults and my severe stress. It's a leading indicator, and it tells me that in the next 12 months or so, assuming that interest rates don't do much, either up or down, then we are going to see further rises in 90-day defaults. We're going to see it not just amongst the battlers, which is where you expect to see it, not just in Western Australia. I'm most concerned about those more affluent households who've got multiple investment properties, who've got considerable commitments in terms of their normal mortgages and other commitments as well, like school fees and everything else, and they are still not seeing their incomes rise. So I'm more worried about the defaults among the more affluent households, places like Bondi, for example, places like the North Shore in Sydney, not just in the western suburbs. So we're going to see it go up. How much up depends, I think, on a few of those unnatural questions I raised earlier on. But many households are now coming to the conclusion they have to sell now, because if they don't sell now, they'll not get out and they'll default ultimately.
All right, time's up. Please join me in thanking our panel today.
From Digital Finance Analytics. thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.